150 years ago, the pioneers of early Tasmania landed on the grassy banks of the Derwent River and went to work to build the settlement of Hobart Town. Today, the Derwent is the most important river in the island, and Hobart the biggest city, stretching for miles along the riverbanks. Hobart is the capital of the state. It is the chief centre for commerce, largely because the Derwent estuary is broad and deep, and big boats can call at the port. The Derwent rises in the highland heart of Tasmania and flows southeastwards to the sea at Hobart. Along the valley are many interesting and lovely places, attracting thousands of tourists every year. We shall see some of these places if we follow this river steamer upstream from Hobart to New Norfolk. On the outskirts of the city stands Government House, where the governor lives, overlooking the Hobart Bridge. The engineer on the bridge has raised the lift span, ready for our boat to pass through. There's quite a lot of traffic on the road, waiting for the span to come down again. As we head towards Risdon, the river narrows, and we come to the Electrolytic zinc works, where zinc and fertilizers are manufactured. This is one of the biggest industrial concerns in Tasmania. Heading upstream, we can see in the distance how the suburbs of Hobart have spread along the riverbanks in recent years. And then, around the bend at Claremont, the big Cadbury's chocolate factory comes into sight. Now we're passing Granton and coming up to Bridgewater. There is a long causeway and a steel bridge here, carrying the main Hobart-Launceston road over the river. The stone causeway was built by convicts in the early days, when this was the first crossing on the Derwent. Over above the causeway is a wildlife sanctuary, where many native birds gather. At the dromedary, above Bridgewater, the scenery becomes more rugged. At the end of this lovely stretch of river lies Boyer, the home of the Australian Newsprint Mills. These are the only mills in the southern hemisphere that make newsprint, the raw material on which our newspapers are printed. The timber, which is pulped at the mills, is cut in the bush farther up the valley and comes down by rail. As we go upriver, we pass several old homesteads. They remind us that settlers came to farm in the Derwent Valley in the earliest days of our island history. And now we steam under Pulpit Rock, overlooking the famous gorge that leads to New Norfolk. The town of New Norfolk has spread far and wide since the first settlers came from Norfolk Island in 1807. The town was a military outpost in the early days, and the commandant lived in this elegant mansion overlooking the river. The sentry box of the garrison still stands at Lachlan Park. There's one old building that used to be a stable. Now it has been turned into a coffee house that is very popular with tourists. Did you know that the oldest church in Tasmania is at New Norfolk? It is St. Matthew's, built in 1823. Its stained glass windows are among the loveliest in Australia. New Norfolk can be reached by road, river, or railway, so it is the main centre for the farmers of the Derwent Valley. Fine crops of fruit grow in the fertile valley soil, and every year many loads of raspberries and other small fruits go through New Norfolk to Hobart to keep the jam factories and canneries busy. There's always plenty of work in the apple orchards, too. Jonathan's, Granny Smith's, Golden Delicious, Cleopatra's, Democrats. They all go rolling into the packing cases at picking time in the autumn. Autumn is a golden time in the Derwent Valley, a time when many tourists visit the Salmon Ponds in their setting of beautiful trees a few miles upstream from New Norfolk. Salmon Ponds is a fish hatchery where young trout are bred to replenish the fishing streams of Tasmania. These big fellows are just kept for visitors to look at. Further upstream, we come to pastoral country where sheep and cattle graze beside the quiet river. And then, at Macquarie Plains, the valley spreads into broad alluvial flats. The little town of Gretna stands here on a rise above the river, one of the oldest settlements on the Derwent. Bushy Park across the river has its history too. There are homesteads here that carry us back to the early days of the last century, when farmers were just beginning to grow hops in Tasmania. Today, from the slopes above Glenora, the rich green hop fields carpet the floor of the valley. At picking time, the kilns are crammed with bales of freshly cured hops, which go to Hobart for sale to breweries on the mainland. The hanging vines bring good money to the pockets of the pickers, too. Town and country folk come flocking to the valley for the autumn months to bring in Australia's biggest harvest of hops. Hop picking isn't the only big event in the Derwent Valley. The Bushy Park Show on New Year's Day brings the crowds together, too. 6 of the toughest bushmen in the state are battling for the Axemen's Championship. There's quite a battle to get onto the roundabouts, too. Out in the show ring, the ponies are all lined up waiting for the judges to make up their minds. Ah, here's one of the prize winners. But it looks as if this little fellow has won all the other ribbons. As we go further up the valley, we find ourselves back in pastoral country again. Meat and wool provide the farmers with their income here. Leaving the course of the Derwent now, we follow the Russell Valley through Westerway to National Park and the lakes. This road is busy with buses all summer through, for this part of Tasmania is famous for its wild beauty. One of the loveliest sights is the Russell Falls, buried deep in the bush at National Park. At the heart of National Park is Lake Fenton, which supplies Hobart with some of its water. Much of the upper Derwent Valley is covered with native bush, and many timber workers live in the towns of Fitzgerald and Medina. At Medina, the Australian Newsprint Mills have a big base where the timber lorries unload the logs they haul in from the bush. The logs go by rail to be made into paper at the Newsprint Mills at Boyer down the river. And now, we must leave the bush and go down river too, to refresh our memories of the places we saw along the valley. First, there was the city of Hobart, the capital of the state, at the mouth of the Derwent River. There was the Electrolytic zinc works at Risdon, one of Tasmania's most important industrial plants. Beyond Bridgewater, there was the big Newsprint Mills at Boyer. The town of New Norfolk came next, with its historic old buildings, an important farming centre too. We passed the hop fields at Bushy Park, where most of Australia's hops are grown. Further up the valley, out in the bush beyond Medina, we saw the logging camp that feeds the Newsprint Mills. And so finally, we came to the National Park, the crown at the head of Tasmania's beautiful Derwent Valley.